All right, well, welcome to another edition of IAEI News Live. My name is Thomas Dimitrovich, and today's discussion is on design parameters and the NEC. So from a design perspective, you like my cup? I got my new cup. Thanks to Jody Wages, got a new cup. So from a design perspective, design engineers have to make decisions every day. And there is no time more critical than in the design phase of a project. So today, for today's IAEI News Live, we're going to focus on design parameters and the NEC. My name is Thomas Dimitrovich, and it all starts now. All right, so I hope you're going to get your copy of the code book out. And as usual, get your spectacles. The book is getting bigger and the text is getting smaller. I don't know, every day it seems to get smaller and smaller and smaller. But we're going to navigate this book and we're going to talk about design parameters and some of the decisions that we need to be making as engineers, as designers, consultants, contractors, laying out projects. Very important time in the project to not miss some details and make sure that you cover all of your bases, because you may not get another opportunity. So I hope you have your coffee and I hope you have your IAEI mug. I'm sure if you need one, we can figure out a way to get you one. So let's talk about, and again, my reference is going to be the 2023 code. We're going to check some of the references that I have, and I believe I have some slides, but we'll double check. All right, so safety has to be a critical or play a critical role in your designs or in our designs as we make the decisions for value engineering on projects, as we make the decisions in the initial design process. It is very important that we build safety into our designs. And it's very important that we don't engineer safety out of our designs. And you and I both know that all happens. Oh, I do want to say, this is being recorded. This is a recorded session. This is a recorded session. And I'm leaving all of the bloopers in because I'm just going to record this and we're going with it. I'm in the air probably right now at this time, so I probably won't even be able to join in. But I just wanted to make sure that we did not miss an IAEI News Live. So safety plays a critical role, and I have 5 areas that I want to cover. I want to cover the NEC. I talked to various individuals and I asked them, before you start designing a project, what's the first thing you do? And I can honestly say I don't get it all the time, but I do get individuals making the statement that they grab the NEC. And I don't know if it's just because they're talking to me and they know I'm engaged with the NEC and I know it's important and I want to have everybody understand how important the National Electrical Code is. But we're going to talk a little bit about whether or not that should be your first go-to. Focusing on customer goals. We're going to talk about what are some of the customer goals that you need to be thinking about, and they will vary by customer. They'll vary by application. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. We're going to get back to some of the basics, and I know a lot of the materials, we may think we completely understand all of the basics, but I think there's a lot of work to be done right there. You can't forget the basics. Specifications. Oh, man, I'll tell you what. So, clarity. Clarity is very important. When we talk about the National Electrical Code, there's a task group that talks about usability, and we make changes in the code that speak to clarity. Because when clarity is missing, when ambiguity exists, you may not get what you think you asked for. When ambiguity exists in the code, we can think we're doing what the NEC tells us, but in reality, we're not. So clarity, there's a lot to be said about safety and clarity, and that is one of the bullet points for our discussion. So clear specifications is important, and then communications. So I'm going to try, in the time we have left, which is about 50 minutes, less than 50 minutes, about 44 minutes or so, I'm going to try to cover each of these. All right, so let's talk about the NEC and being a design guide. 90.2. What is remember, chapter or article 90 is, I call it the dumpster diving article, because why? Well, it's article 90, and it's basically the instructions for the code book on how to use the code book. So 90.2, use and application. A is practical safeguarding. The purpose of the code is the practical safeguarding of persons and property from the hazards arising from the use of electricity. The code is not intended as a design specification or an instruction manual for untrained persons. So does that mean that it is intended as an instruction manual and a design specification for trained persons? Ambiguity. Remember? Clarity is very important. Words are very important. I could read this both ways. I don't believe that's what they intended. This book is not a design guide or a design specification, period. And I believe what they meant here, and it's not meant as an instruction manual for untrained persons. All of that is one piece. So it's not a design spec. We don't say, hey, we're going to build a hospital. Go grab Article 517 and throw it out there and say, there's my spec. No, right? 90.2, and I just lost it. Now, Article 90 is a really short. It's 1, 2, 3 pages long. 3 pages long, but very important. So 90.2a talks about practical safeguarding. B is adequacy. I love this section. I love this section. I love this one and one other one, because what's so funny is many times, often, I'll just say often, I will hear people say, I build quality. I have quality designs because I follow the National Electrical Code. And I'll go, really? That's your bar. I'll say, absolutely. We believe in safety. All right. This code contains provisions that are considered necessary for safety. Okay, that's great. Great so far. Compliance therewith and proper maintenance results in an installation that is essentially free from hazard. Okay, you can go to your customers and tell them, we have an installation that is essentially free from hazards. But it's not necessarily going to be efficient, convenient, or adequate. Is that really your basis of design? Is that really your bar that you've established for your design? So my contention is, my opinion is this book is, although great as it is, from a design perspective, from keeping your customers' wants and needs in check and in your vision, you don't lead with what many refer to as a bare minimum requirement, because it will be essentially free from hazard. And it might not be efficient, convenient, or adequate for good service or future expansion of electrical use. So I just caution you to realize, take the book, take these requirements into perspective. Don't rely solely on the contents of this book. You need to consider safety for your applications. You need to consider the wants and needs of your customer. And we're going to get to those as well, because that's one of my bullet items for our discussion. So first lesson of the day, read 90.2, practical safeguarding and adequacy. All right. We have installations covered. We have installations not covered. All right. So how about one other section? A lot of people forget about this one. We're going to go to 220, chapter 2. Now we're into 220. We all know what Article 220 deals with, right? That's your load calculation. So we're going to go to 220, if I could find it here. And this past cycle, we moved a table. We moved, remember, 220.12. 220.12 in previous editions was the general, included the general lighting loads by general lighting loads, your VA per square foot, for different types of occupancies. And it used to be in 220.12, which would have been in part 2, branch circuit load calculations, but in the 2020 code, in the 2023 code, we moved it. Why? Because it didn't make sense. We didn't use that table 220.12 for load calculations to determine ampacity on a branch circuit. We used it for part 3, feeder and service load calculations. So we moved it from 220.12 to where it, in my opinion, and apparently in panel 2's opinion, 220.42. So 220.42 has an informational note. And I love this. The unit values. There's a lot in this informational note. I'll take a look at this. It says the unit values of table 220.42a are based on a minimum load conditions and 80% power factor and might not provide sufficient capacity for the installation contemplated. So, for the design engineers out there, for the designers, whether you're a licensed engineer, whether you're an electrical contractor, whether you are a professional who's been doing this all their life and they are one of the best, probably better than licensed people and trained people, if you're relying on this book to meet your customers' wants and needs, I think you need to read the details. Because in my opinion, in many cases, we will go above and beyond the bare minimum requirements found in the NEC for good reason. Another good place that, think about dwelling units. Think about dwelling units. When we're looking at, when we do, how do we treat a dwelling unit? When we are determining how many branch circuits are in the dwelling unit, etc. We do our load calculations. We calculate the number of branch circuits needed, and then we install that. That's all we do. We don't do a branch circuit load calculation all over the place for dwelling units. We just determine basically the number of branch circuits. We roll VA, we roll lighting and receptacles into one calculation. And that's what we do. But if you look in every dwelling unit, I highly doubt we ever only use the minimum requirement of branch circuits in a dwelling unit. We've got circuits going everywhere. And remember, I mean, this is outside of the kitchen requirements, the laundry requirements, and things of that nature. Living rooms, dining rooms, dens, bedrooms, I'm sure those aren't served by the minimum number of branch circuits. So if you actually did a calculation and calculate what the actual minimum number of circuits you would have for a dwelling unit of whatever design, however many bedrooms, kitchen, etc., and you added that up, and then you actually looked inside of the panel board and counted how many circuit breakers you have, my gut tells me we're going above and beyond. Why? Because we're meeting customers' wants and needs. We know we don't want one circuit breaker to take out a majority of the home. We want to break things up. I know some contractors will put some receptacles and lighting on one circuit. So that you know if for whatever reason you have an overload or whatever, you take out a circuit, you know the circuit is out because the lights don't work. Everybody has their own thing, right? And you have your thing. I'm sure if you're watching this, you're probably hopefully thinking in your mind how you lay out projects, how you lay out your branch circuits in a dwelling unit. You have strategies, and maybe your strategy is what brings customers back to you over and over and over because of how you have approached the layout of your power distribution system in some of your applications, which again go above the bare minimum requirements. All right, so enough said about that. Let's take a look back where we're at. So I think I hopefully give you some guidance or some talking points to help people understand that the NEC is not a design guide. All right. Now, focusing on your customers' goals. I'll tell people that when you get an order, your first call is to understand what your customers' wants and needs are. When you're laying out your project, you need to understand what your customers' wants and needs are. I'm putting my book on the side for this discussion because this goes above and beyond bare minimum NEC requirements. My philosophy or my opinion is that you understand your customers' wants and needs. You design the system to meet those wants and needs, and then you make sure you didn't violate codes and standards. You make sure you're using products the way you're supposed to be used, like in 110.3. 110.3 tells us product testing, evaluation, and listing in accordance with applicable product standards recognizes achieving equivalent and effective safety for equipment installed to comply with this code. We're using listed, hopefully listed products where we can, where it makes sense, where we have them available, even though it doesn't say, for example, circuit breakers. Circuit breakers, until the 2023 National Electrical Code, did not require to be listed. But would you go out and buy a non-listed circuit breaker? Probably not. Would an inspector approve a non-listed circuit breaker? Probably not. Are we going above and beyond the requirements of the code? Code didn't say it had to be a listed product. Sure heck we are. And why would we do that? Because we understand about safety and meeting customer wants and needs. So, let's talk a little bit about customer wants and needs. Remember, when you're looking at a project, you're going to be this guy. You're going to be juggling many different goals, and some goals are competing. You want the safest, most reliable installation at the lowest cost. Some of this stuff does not go together. You got to do the best you can. And you have to know when you have to compromise. Right? There is risk. You're going to be managing risk in your design. Remember, risk is likelihood of the occurrence and the severity of the event. So you may make decisions. You may say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z in this application because the likelihood is very low. From a reliability perspective, not safety related at all. Your customer may have reliability needs. And you may elect to put a backup generator in, or you may elect not to. You may say, look, I've done a reliability analysis on the utility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And based upon your desire in your wants and needs, this is what you need. Maybe a portable generator is all you need. Maybe a stationary automatic transfer switch generator is what you need. There's another thing, what you need and what you want. So, and I'm going to go back on a personal experience on this one. I built a house. It was my first house I ever built. And I spoke with the electrician and I said, I want an automatic transfer switch and a generator, 30 kW, for my house. And he said, you don't need that. And I said, I want that. I understood I may not need it, but that's what I wanted. There's a difference. Now, did I actually use the automatic transfer switch? It came on and off for me. It was a convenience factor. Was I home most of the times when that went out? And did I need the backup power? I lived out in the country. I needed it for well water. I needed it for septic system. So I could not cook. I couldn't shower if I didn't have that. Where in a city, I might have some of those basic fundamentals. But where I was, I could not get water if I did not have power. So it was important to me. I didn't want to go a day. I didn't want to go hours without having that backup power. So I wanted it. And I did use it. Could I have gotten away with a portable backup generator? Maybe. That's not what I wanted. Customer wants and needs are a critical factor. You want to keep your customer happy. I was willing to pay for, and I knew it was going to be more expensive, and I budgeted for it. So the gentleman who did my house tried to talk me out of it. I mean, he did if that was his goal, he would have been successful had I not been stubborn. Meet your customer wants and needs. and help them understand the financial impact of those wants and needs. But we all are thinking about designs that have risk, and we may accept. We don't. Our customer, that's another important piece. Remember, when as a designer, if you make statements like, the chance of this happening, I'm going to go this route because the chance of this happening is low. You're accepting risk for your customer. In many of those types of decisions, what I used to do is let my customer make that decision. If I knew to meet a certain level, say, of reliability, I had to do X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z was more expensive than LMNOP, okay? I would take that and say, I have to make a decision. The likelihood, from a risk perspective, the likelihood may be low. Severity may be high, and severity might not be life safety related. It might just be that, look, if this condition happens, you're going to be without power for a week, which means your business is down, which means you're not profitable, which means people just go home. Nobody's going to get killed, hurt, maimed, etc. The likelihood of that is at this level. Severity from a safety perspective is low. From a business perspective, could be high. I don't make those decisions. I let my customer make those decisions, because if they've identified I want a specific level of reliability, and I know I'm close to making a call that could jeopardize that, I let my customer make that call. I give them all the information, my expertise. You give them all of your expertise, and you let them make the call, because it could cost them more money if you make decision A as opposed to decision B. Don't take that on your shoulders, because if you do, if and when that condition occurs and your customer is out, you're going to get the bad name. But if you can point and say, no, Mr. Customer, look, I know you're upset, but I explained to you this could happen, and apparently it did, and you went with decision B because it saved you $5,000 instead of going with decision A. Decision A would have saved you X amount of more dollars. So you have to help your customer understand that logic and understand and be a part of the decision-making process. So we manage risk. We manage risk as part of the NEC in many cases. And I know if you're watching this, you and I, we have had this discussion in the past. So you and I know we have had this discussion in the past. Nope. So, done. Just want to fix something here. All right. So if you're familiar with risk and the NEC, we control likelihood and we control severity. We control likelihood through working space, barriers, disconnects, putting disconnects in, trying to make things from a safety perspective. From a severity perspective, you've got arc flash, you've got shock, We have arc flash reduction technologies. We have GFCI technologies. We have now the special purpose GFCI. We've got surge to mitigate the amount of damage that surge voltage transients do to a power distribution system. But from your customer's perspective, the severity column might be how much money they lose because of an outage, because of downtime. So when you think about what your customers' wants and needs may be, say from a school perspective or a church, maximum power quality is not as important. Maintenance costs is not as important. What one row in these types of what is your most important aspect from a university or a school perspective or a church? It's safety. Your regulatory requirements are lower. You're a minimum initial investment. So you've got two competing aspects when you're dealing with schools and churches. They want safety, but yet their initial investment, it needs to be minimal. Their initial costs. And in many cases, you might have to design safety in because you aren't going to be able to do that after the fact. Let's take a look at a hospital. Wow. Hospital gives you a little bit of a picture. Power quality is important. And when I say power quality, you might be talking, there's a lot of probably frequency harmonic issues, maybe voltage transients. They want to minimize maintenance costs, right? I mean, these systems have generators, they have emergency systems, they have life-critical systems. There's a lot going on in a hospital. Efficiency and minimum operational costs aren't as high on their value props. They don't find that as important. It's important, but not as important as maximum power quality, minimum maintenance, not as important as service and continuity, right? Think about a hospital. They want uptime. They don't want downtime. They've got to think about people who are on life support, you have to think about not just that. From a hospital perspective, I was sitting next to an individual on a plane at one point in my travels, and I asked them what they do, and they said they focus on all of the emergency rooms across the country. And I started to talk a little bit with them about reliability in the healthcare world, power system reliability. And I went straight to, the person on the operating room and things like that. And he said, she says, the operating rooms have procedures. She goes, when a hospital loses power for a period of time, there are methods and there are batteries and et cetera, other ways to, get the patient stable, et cetera. And her comment was, where there's a biggest impact from a reliability perspective is in the emergency room. Think about having an accident, going to an emergency room, a doctor looking at you. They don't have x-ray eyes. You have pains. They've got to figure out, do you have punctured lungs? Do you have broken ribs? Do you have things inside you that should not be inside you? They need to determine all of this. And what do they use? Technology that is powered. They need to get to your medical records. Where does that come from? That comes from computers and other systems that are powered. If they can't get that information in a timely manner, they can't make the right decisions quickly to save your life. So from her perspective, she said, it's not about people dying on the operating room. It's about that emergency room and making decisions quickly, whether you're in the emergency room or you have someone codes inside of their own hospital bed, you need to get to records. You need to do it reliably and quickly. All right, that's the hospital. How about, okay, let's talk a little bit about healthcare pain points. In 2011, United States hospitals recorded over 253,000 work-related injuries and illnesses. 6.8 work-related injuries and illnesses for every 100 FTEs, full-time employees. Almost twice the rate for private industry. So in 2003, so we have a couple events that we can draw some conclusions from, learning moments. When the northeastern part of the United States in 2003 experienced a widespread power outage, 45 million people across 8 states were left without power. These were some of the things that hospitals in the healthcare industry experienced. HVAC and water pressure, very important, very important. Sterilizing instruments, right? Loss of refrigeration and cooking. You say, well, who wants to cook a meal when I'm laying on the operating room table? Well, you may need nutrients. You may need refrigeration. What do we store in refrigeration? Blood? Maybe other things that I don't even know what their names and acronyms are. It can't view x-rays. They can't register a patient. And then you go, well, what's whoopee ding ding about that? Just get them into the hospital. Well, there's a lot of details that have to be covered before you get into a hospital room. And transporting patients and supplies. Elevators, probably pretty important. Multi-floor, trying to get supplies to the right people, try to get a patient from the 8th floor to the 7th floor without going down steps and not having any power. Now let's get off of hospitals. Let's go to retail facilities. Now, a retail facility, what do they care about? What are your customer wants and needs? Safety, very, very important. They don't want anybody dying in their facility. Very critical. I would also throw safety in with regard to temperature, depending upon what type of retail. Maybe it's a grocery store. I don't know. Can't let the eggs go bad. Can't let the cheese go bad. Can't let certain products get defrosted and then frozen again. So safety is very important. They do care a lot about minimizing the initial investment. So again, competing objectives, and you want to minimize your operational costs and maximize your efficiencies. Okay, so some of these, I would argue those three, minimizing operational costs, minimizing initial investment, and maximizing safety, I'm sorry, they're competing objectives financially. Now, Florida's largest supermarket chain created its own initiative to make sure its stores can open after a hurricane. They realized the importance to the community and then the financial opportunity of being able to supply food and other supplies after a hurricane. They invested $100 million to install 500 kilowatt generators at every store in hurricane-prone areas. That is a significant investment and decision. Is it a code requirement? No. Now, you have to follow the code requirements when you install all those generators, obviously. But this is not an emergency system. It's not a critical operation power system. It is not a legally required standby system. These are 702 systems, optional standby. They lost $60 million from groceries that went bad after hurricanes knocked out power to its stores. 60 million. Let's talk about industrial processes. Oh boy, look at these bars. They want minimum maintenance. They want minimum operating costs. They want maximum flexibility and expansion. They want maximum service continuity, and they want safety, and they want it all. And they want it probably at a minimum cost. Minimum maintenance, minimum operational costs, and the minimal initial investment isn't as high as the other bars. So they recognize that everything they want is going to cost them money. They recognize that to achieve their goals of minimum operational costs, minimum maintenance, maximum service continuity, and safety, and future expansion, that's an investment in the infrastructure of their facility. These are important things to know, because if you have the mindset that, look, you are going to sacrifice something in safety, sacrifice something in expansion, flexibility. Maybe they said, look, I want busway put installed because I want to be able to move this around. Or maybe they said, I want my transformers larger than what I need. Maybe they said, I need 400 amp panel boards and not 200 amp panel boards, even though they're only putting 60 amps on that panel board. They're making that decision for a reason. Value engineering things like that out would contradict your customer's goals and objectives. It's not necessarily required by code, but your code book is not your design guide. You're not designing the system based upon the NEC requirements. You need to design the system based upon these types of wants and needs. And your specific industrial customer may go, this doesn't even apply to me. I don't care about the maintenance. I don't want to minimize maintenance costs. I want to plan for more maintenance. That's what we do. I don't know. But you have to ask the questions. And when they answer those questions and you design that in, we can't engineer those out unless you let them make the decision. If you're going to compromise if you compromise their goals and objectives, you don't want to go down that road alone. You want to make that decision with your customer, not for your customer. Now, this is probably why they are willing to go above and beyond. This is a refining and petroleum facilities. This was a study. An average downtime cost per hour is $704,000. And these are old numbers. It's got to be higher than that today. I've been using that number for quite some time. 704,000 plus an hour. A 100 megawatt petrochemical plant produces approximately $2 billion. These are old numbers. $2 billion per year in revenues, or $228,000 per hour, with an average of 8 hours of downtime per year. An average 100 megawatt plant will lose over $1.8 million in revenue annually to electrical system outages. Keep that in mind. If you elect to reduce protection requirements, or not install protection requirements, or decide not to educate the customer that such protection requirements exist that would reduce the downtime, with knowing these types of numbers, if you could reduce the downtime, you could save your customer millions of dollars. Propose the ideas. You may say, well, Tom, it's not required by the code book. Arc flash reduction is 24087, only starts at 1200 amps and above. Why there? Why can't you put that technology elsewhere? Ground fault protection of equipment, only 1000 amps and above. And Tom, only on service equipment. And now in the 2023 code cycle, they went to feeders, 1000 amps and above. Why would I put that anywhere lower in the system if I'm not required to? These numbers are your motivating factors right here. You could save your customer millions of dollars. And after the fact, if you don't put them in, it probably will never get put in. You can design these things in. Do you think your customer who focuses on petrochem understands electrical distribution and all of the options? You go to classes, you watch this video. You're watching all of these videos. You know what the options are. Share that with your customer. When you walk into that home and you see, when you walk into a residential home, if you're there, if you're an electrician, and you're there to, I don't know, change light bulbs or change out receptacles, whatever it is, maybe add a circuit, and you notice thousands of dollars of electronics equipment and there's no surge protection in that house. Do you think maybe you educate the homeowner and say, hey, you may want to consider, and oh, by the way, I got it on the truck. I can get it done while I'm here. You don't have to pay for another service call. Maximize your potential in bringing value to the homeowner. You're not selling cars. You are educating the homeowner and letting them make the decision. You say, this is the solution. This is the value that it can add to your infrastructure. Ask them if they've ever lost anything to a surge. If they don't have GFCIs in the kitchen around sinks, do you think maybe a little bit of an education might help? Maybe. And if they ask you to put it in, that's great. You're not being, I know some individuals may think that, look, I don't want to be, I'm not a car salesman. I'm just there to do what I'm supposed to do. You are operating a business. You're providing a service. You have knowledge that you can help educate your customer with and help them make the right decisions. There's another one. Automotive industry. Okay. Continuous processes require reliable and secure power for automotive facilities. This was a study. This is back to 2005. This is almost 20 years old. Do you think $22,000 a minute in 2005 is the same as it is today? Do you think it went up? I think it did. But back in 2005, it was $22,000 a minute. When you have unplanned outages in an automotive facility, it costs big bucks. So these individuals understand these types of installations, understand that it's not all just about safety. Safety is critical and important, but reliability goes above and beyond the bare minimum requirements of the National Electrical Code. So we need to be prepared to provide that value to our customers. How about data centers? Here we go. Maximum power quality, obviously very high on the list. I'm not sure why it's not like up there with the same as safety. Minimum operating costs. They want flexibility and expansion. It's a data center. That's what they do. They just keep growing. Service continuity, oh my goodness, very important. If your ATM is down when you need it, that would be ungood. And safety is obviously high. So focus on your customer goals. Understand that meeting those customer goals is important. Now, how about the basics? I have 5, I think. Yep. 5 key points on fundamentals. And you get your fundamentals. You understand those fundamentals. If you're watching this channel, if you are engaged with the IAEI, you know what the fundamentals are with regard to how important the single line diagram is. If you have downtime, take lockout, tagout off the table. You have a portion of your plant that is lost power and you are not producing widgets. You are losing $22,000 a minute. You need to get power back on. Where's the breaker that feeds that equipment? You ain't going to get it done without single line diagram. Short circuit study, you need to make sure that that's critical for equipment evaluations, for selective coordination, and incident energy. You can't do 3, 4, and 5 if you don't know what your fault currents are in your power distribution system. So get on it. Single line diagram, in my opinion, the single line diagram is like the most important piece of artwork, of information for your power distribution system. If there's anything that your customer is going to use when you leave, it's probably going to be this document that shows how the system is laid out, what is supplied from where, whether it be for lockout, tagout reasons, whether it be for resetting a circuit breaker, whatever. This is going to be the document that your customer uses more often than not. And they can be very complex, very complex. You look at this diagram and you think, wow, there's a lot of information on that diagram. 70E reminds us, all of these different sections in 70E tell us the importance of the one-line diagram. 70B as well, the National Electrical Code as well. Your available fault current study, we already told you how important that is. Current limitation, your equipment, you're doing your equipment evaluations. What you don't want to do is let the smoke out. You don't want that to happen. You don't want equipment that should stay together when a fault passes through them, not occur inside. Close the doors off. That is unreal. That's a misapplication of the product. Products are intended to react that way during abnormal conditions in your facility. That could be months of downtime, could be days of downtime, and that could be loss of life. Send somebody to the hospital. And if you don't care about that, it could cost you a lot of money. It could cost your customer a lot of money. So be mindful of the ratings of the system, all of the equipment, make sure it's applied correctly. If you're doing series rated systems, make sure you're following the details. Anytime you make a decision to save money in the power distribution system, and my gut tells me that the customers aren't making these decisions. We are, as electrical professionals. Do you think a customer says, Tom, when you design my power system that I want to be the most reliable ever, because I lose $22,000 a minute, make sure everything is series rated for me? No. They don't even know what series ratings are. They don't. We do. We make these decisions. And in some cases, if you're doing a series rated application and you didn't consider motor contribution, you're not only violating the National Electrical Code, but you could have an unintended rapid disassembly in the field because of misapplication. So it's very important to understand the details, the devil's in the details, when we make these decisions to reduce the cost of the electrical infrastructure. What else? So we got all of these different costs. We know what selective coordination is, all that jazz. Let's take a look. We know what our incident energy analysis is. We know that we can design things differently to reduce damage. We can design things differently to reduce damage, to reduce the possibility and duration of downtime. Those are decisions. This is I think a half decent one that this is a fundamental one. Secondary of every transformer, that piece of equipment, whatever is served by the secondary of every transformer, is going to have high incident energy. Why? Because it relies on what's on the line side of the transformer, which is artificially inflated in size. So you take the design on the far left for that industrial control panel that we're serving, that little black box that's there. The calories in this equipment, it's not showing up. because of, I don't know why. I gotta fix this one. Display, let me look at filters. There's no filters. Let's take a look at this one. There we go. All right. Now we can see the numbers. So the incident energy in the far left one is 23.5 calories per centimeter squared. Imagine justified energized work. Imagine you have to establish an electrically safe work condition. You think you turned the right breaker off, but now you have to verify absence of voltage. And you've got to go through the whole process for establishing an electrically safe work condition. You still have to dress for success. You're going to be dressing for 23.5 calories. But if we simply move the disconnect, make that a main lug only panel and panel board, and put the overcurrent device or the disconnect, the fusible disconnect or circuit breaker in a box ahead of that panel board on the secondary of that transformer, I take the calories from 23.5 calories per centimeter squared down to 0.34 calories per centimeter squared. My arc flash boundary is you could be wearing gloves, glasses. You're not going to be wearing a 40 cal outfit to verify absence of voltage. And because that disconnect is probably right next to that panel board, lock and tag it out, you can see the disconnect. You know you've opened the right one. You know you've locked and tagged out the right one. Lookalike equipment ain't gonna sneak up behind you and bite you. These types of design principles not required by the code. Not at all required by the code. This type of a design is all you, bud. All you. You either help your customer understand the value of that type of a design, or you don't. That may be a wash in price. It may not be any more expensive. There may be some space. You have to put another disconnect on the wall. I think those are details that make a difference. Don't rely on the NEC to make those calls for you, is my point. And then I will say, all right, so I want to talk about the fourth item on the list, which is clear specifications. Now, when we create a specification, someone is going to quote the project, right? Someone's going to say, okay, here's what I need. And if the specification is vague, then those who are going to quote that project are probably not going to give you what you want. You'll see possibly the numbers, the dollars amounts vary between individuals who are quoting projects. One individual might say, I know what you're asking for, but that's not what you said. This is what I'm going to give you. Another individual must say, hey, I know what you want, but if I give you what you wanted, as opposed to what you asked for, it's going to be more expensive. So I'm going to give you sort of what you asked for. And then you'll see change notices occur after the fact. So clarity in specifications is critical. And we do that in the National Electrical Code as well. Clarity is critical. And then finally, communications. This is, from a design perspective, making sure that you have good communications with the customer, your suppliers, and the inspectors. Those are three key people. You want to make sure that your customer's getting what they want and they're engaged and feel a part of the process. You want to make sure the suppliers can get you the equipment that you need when you need it and how you need it done, right? And you want to make sure that you're not value engineering things out because certain parts and pieces aren't coming when you need them. And you need to have your authority having jurisdiction involved with the design decisions and how you're meeting the National Electrical Code requirements. You don't want to mess things up. Quite often, I don't want to say quite often, I have seen in some applications, the design engineering firm hire a professional to look at their design from an NEC perspective and make sure they're not violating the NEC. They're focused on the customer, meeting the customer wants and needs. The last thing you need is to have a project go south because you didn't take into consideration that detail of the National Electrical Code. So communications, I have code adoption, code enforcement, code change or change notices, any of the change notices, and then any value engineering that might go on the project. Some value engineering is good and healthy, but any changes outside of the design need to be communicated with the designer, whether that be an engineer or some professional, a qualified person who's laid out the design. Don't make changes without communicating those changes throughout. That could compromise safety, could compromise meeting your customer wants and needs and your goals, customers' goals and objectives, and all that jazz. So make sure you communicate. So your goal is to reduce likelihood and severity, not just from a safety perspective, but remember, you've got to think about likelihood and severity with regard to your customers' goals and objectives. Well, hopefully this session gave you a little bit of insight to from a design perspective, things you need to consider, etc. And hopefully you got something out of our time together. Thanks for sticking in there for an hour. I value, and I hope you value, I value you as a viewer and providing input. Please keep the chats going, keep the comments going. IAEI does not exist without its members. We need you, we need your engagement, and we need to learn from each other. So thanks for all you do for the electrical industry. Thanks for what you do for electrical safety. Stay safe, and please stay healthy. We'll see you next week. Signing off.